So it's a cold, wet, windy night, so people may start trickling in, but we'll try and minimize the disruption. So a little bit about me. My name is Herbert Cole. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Livermore, California, which is here. And I'm a certified emergency manager through the International Association of Emergency Management. I've been in the emergency management world off and on since 1991. I responded to Hurricane Andrew, the Northridge earthquake, several tornadoes and severe storm events in the Midwest. I've worked on disaster recovery with regard to documentation and how you basically bring businesses back up. And about 10 years ago, watching Katrina, I decided I wanted to make a midlife career change and do this professionally full-time. So I did. It's long hours. Right now, forgive me if I start to kind of stumble. I'm working on 13 hours right now, so at the end of this day it'll be 14. But tonight what we're going to talk about is disaster preparedness basics. And a lot of this you've probably heard before, but hopefully some of this you haven't. And the idea here is to get you thinking. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to tell you some things to get your brain going. And the number one tool that you have in a disaster or crisis scenario is what?
Communication.
Wait, I saw somebody point at it. What is it?
Your brain.
Your brain. So when you're in a crisis situation, the first thing that usually checks out is common sense and your brain. And what we're going to talk about here tonight is going to hopefully get you to the point where you don't do that. So what is a disaster? Somebody tell me what a disaster is.
Earthquake.
An earthquake, okay.
Fire, wildfire.
Fire,
Flood.
flood. Okay. So those are hazards or events that can become disasters. Disasters are categorized by natural, human influence, technological. And what we described most there were all natural disasters, right? What's a technological disaster?
Oil refinery blowing up.
Oil refinery, okay. Nuclear could be both technological and what else? Human influenced? All right, okay.
Technical could be losing all your power for 2 weeks.
Losing all your power, that's right. That could be a disaster. So, disasters, though, are really a matter of perspective. And the reason I'm going to tell you that, and the reason I'm saying that is because it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I sit down to watch the baseball game. I prop my feet up on the table. I've got my drink of choice. I've got a bowl of popcorn. I turn on the game. I'm in the middle of the game, third inning. It's a really good game, and boom, we have a 7.5 earthquake. Now I sit there and I'm going, whoa, what's happening here? Things start kicking in, right? House is rocking, the house is rolling. None of my pictures come off the wall. None of my furniture comes down. My TV stays anchored to the wall. Nothing comes out of the shelves in the kitchen or out of the lower cabinets. The refrigerator stays closed. Okay? My house is moving. My next door neighbor, on the other hand, 7.5 earthquake, all this furniture comes over, his cabinets fly open, the refrigerator opens up, dumps food on the ground. Who has a disaster? He does. Do I have a disaster? No. Why? Okay, I prepared, I mitigated. So it's a matter of perspective. From my perspective, I just had a really big jolt. From his perspective, he has a disaster. So what we want to talk about tonight is how do you get to the point where your perspective is it's not a disaster, and we move you more towards this way of like, just an inconvenience. So hazards in our area. Name some hazards in our area, because disasters result from a vulnerability to a hazard. In the scenario I just presented you, what were the vulnerabilities that my neighbor had to the earthquake? Furniture wasn't bolted down. That made him vulnerable to things collapsing, right? What else? Refrigerator. How many of you latch your refrigerator closed?
I don't think it has a latch.
No? No, they used to, but you know, children would climb inside of them, they get locked in, and then they made that illegal, right? But you can buy child safety locks now for your refrigerator. One of the things that you don't want to see is coming into the kitchen in the middle of the night after the earthquake and everything that was in the refrigerator is now on your floor. Because not only may you have broken glass and things like that, but now you've got a big mess to clean up. I didn't have a mess to clean up, my neighbor did. So he was vulnerable to that. What are some things that we are vulnerable to in this area with regard to hazards?
Wildfire.
Wildfire. What else?
Flooding.
Flooding. What makes us vulnerable to flooding?
Location.
Location. So if you build in a floodplain, do you expect to get flooded out? Probably. If you don't build in a floodplain, then you don't get flooded out. Many of us don't have a choice, you know. We go, well, we bought our house, we didn't know we were in a floodplain. But there are things that we can do to mitigate against the damages that occur. Just like I said in the first scenario with the earthquake, I mitigated against damages. So, the hazards in our area, and I'm sorry these slides are really, the projector isn't that sharp, but what's listed up here is avalanche, drought, earthquake, extreme heat, flood, hazardous materials release, landslide, severe winter storm, soil hazards, wildfire, and wind hazards. Which ones do you think that we probably don't have here?
We're not going to get an avalanche.
We're not going to get an avalanche. You sure about that? Did people in Japan think they would have a 9.5 earthquake coupled with a tsunami, coupled with a nuclear meltdown all at once? So never say never.
I think they know they were coming, yeah.
So we may get some heavy snowfall here someday, and you know, on some of these upper slopes up here on the Altamont stuff, who knows? But no, we probably won't have an avalanche in my lifetime. What about severe winter storms?
Yeah.
Okay, that one's a matter of perspective too, because typically a severe weather storm is lots of snow and ice and things like that. Could we get that here? Imagine if we got 6 inches to a foot of snow here overnight. What would happen to the city? Probably be a disaster, right? We don't have plows. We don't have any way to deal with that. How would you get to the grocery store? So those are the types of things that we need to think about. What are my vulnerabilities? If you have questions while I'm talking, I'm more than happy to entertain them, so just raise your hand. So,
I have a question.
yes.
What about the chemicals at the lab?
So are those hazards?
I have no idea what goes on there.
I don't either, so I don't know what the hazard is. Is that a vulnerability, not knowing?
Yeah.
It is. So what do we have to do when we don't know?
Find out.
We can ask them, they may not tell us, but
Sure.
what we can do is we can prepare, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And we'll talk about a specific hazard, and it'll go right to your question. So, what is disaster preparedness? Disaster preparedness is one element of what's called the emergency management cycle. The emergency management cycle is made up of 4 elements: mitigation, preparedness, response, which is the really sexy stuff. That's where people put on the helmets and the vest and run out and do stuff. And then the last one is recovery. So of all of those, tonight we're going to focus on the preparation or preparedness piece. And when it comes to preparedness, there's 2 types of preparedness. There's physical preparedness and there's psychological preparedness. So what's physical preparedness?
Having water, having blankets,
Having water, having blankets, getting all the things that you need, right? What is psychological preparedness?
Understanding that you're going to be on your own.
You're understanding that you're going to be on your own. So this is where we're going to try and start to get you to think a little differently tonight. So the psychological aspect of preparedness is you have to admit to yourself that there are not enough first responders in the world, especially here in Livermore, to come and save you. They don't exist. Right now there are 18 first responders roaming this city on duty. Okay? How many people are in the city right now?
84,000 plus.
About 90,000 at any given time. People on the freeway and people coming in and out to eat and visit. So can 18 first responders respond to, let's say it's 1%. 1% of the population needs immediate life-saving care within the first hour of an event. Can 18 first responders take care of that?
No.
So what we need to do is we need to start thinking, well, what can I do? The other thing is you need to begin to expect that you're going to be spending 7 to 10 days on your own without ever seeing any help. They're going to roll in here, but they're not going to get to us right away. Where's the first place, if there's a large earthquake in the Bay Area, where do you think everything's going to go first?
San Francisco?
San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose. And that's because that's where the mass of people is. And that's where the resources will go. Huh?
That's where the most damage is.
And that's probably where the most damage will be. So what we need to do is we need to start thinking about how are we going to take care of ourselves for 7 to 10 days. So that's the other part of psychological. When I was younger, and I didn't want to admit these things were going to happen. I've lived through every major earthquake in California except Loma Prieta. I did not live up here at that time. But starting in 1971 with San Fernando and all of the Southern California earthquakes and all of the big earthquakes up here, I've been through them all. And I always put my head in the sand. Even though I was working in the industry, I was never going to happen. They're never that bad. And then I saw Katrina on TV and I was like, it can get that bad. Even Andrew wasn't that bad. Andrew was bad, but it wasn't like Katrina. And that was my wake-up call. I pulled my head out of the sand. I said, I do need to start to prepare. I do need to start to be able to do these things on my own. So that's kind of what kick-started me into changing my career path and doing this professionally. So, psychological and physical. Why do we prepare? Why do we physically prepare?
So you have the stuff you need.
So we can have the stuff we need, okay? That's the main reason. Why do we have that stuff? We prepare so that we can respond. Preparation is the first step in response. If we're not prepared, we have no way of responding. So what we want you to do is start to think about, what am I going to do when I respond? They're not mutually exclusive of one another. They go hand in hand. We prepare to respond. The extent of our response need is determined by our preparation and our mitigation efforts. Remember the mitigation I did in the first scenario? I bolted everything down and everything was ready. I have supplies. I have all the supplies I need in case things go really sideways. But my response was minimal because I did all of the work in advance. My neighbor, on the other hand, do you think he's responding? Yeah, he's in response mode, and he's probably running around like a chicken with his head cut off. He can't figure out what to do. What am I going to do? I got to clean this up. Oh, I've got a gas leak. I've got these things. He's experiencing a disaster. So, the ultimate goal of being prepared is resilience. Remember Rocky V? Was it Rocky V where he fought Ivan Drago, the Russian? Four. And what was the whole thing about that movie? It was basically, I'm going to build myself up like a piece of steel, and you can beat me down, but I'm going to get back up. And you can beat me down, and I'm going to get back up. And he kept going and kept going and kept going. And that's what we want to do when we start to prepare. We want to get to that point where we can be so resilient that whatever it is that hits us, it may knock us down, but we can get back up really quick. And that's important not only for you and your family, it's important for the city of Livermore. Because the city of Livermore needs to get back up and running. We need the businesses to get back up and running. We need the citizens to get back up and going to work and doing the things that keep our society running. If you know what happened after Katrina to New Orleans, it's very sad. Because a lot of people they did not have the mechanisms in place to recover. And they left. They walked away. And we don't want to see that happen in our community. We want people to bounce back. We want our community to come back. So we do that by starting this process of preparation. The way we start is build a kit. You've all heard build a kit, make a plan, all of that, right? So how many of you have kits? How many of you are going to start a kit when you get home? Okay, they're real easy. In fact, you're going to leave here with homework. So, a kit, essentials in a kit are basically water, and I'm not going to tell you what to put in your kit because your kit is personal. Okay, but you should have water, a first aid kit, a flashlight with spare batteries. You should have a whistle. Why should you have a whistle?
So you can
Whistle longer than you can yell.
That's it. I can whistle all day long, but after about 3 or 4 hours of screaming, actually probably about an hour of screaming, my voice is gone. Food. And if you're going to put food in your kit, you need to make sure it's food you're going to eat. Because a lot of the stuff that, oh, I just bought these bars, and they're really in. Last night I was at an event and they put out the old rations. You're like, oh, everybody gets to sample one, and I ate it. I was like, oh, there's no way. It was like eating dried lemon cardboard, and it was really bad. And I won't eat that in a disaster. So find food that you will eat. A radio, AM/FM radio, a multi-tool and duct tape, cash. When I worked in the city in San Francisco, I went into the city every day with a large sum of cash and small bills. I always had cash on me in the city. Why? There's an earthquake or a power outage, and I need money. The ATM's probably not working. And I guarantee you if there's a large-scale earthquake, the banks are going to be closed and the ATMs are not going to be working. So what am I going to do? Make sure you have some cash on you. Toilet paper and hygiene supplies. So in a disaster, next to cash, the next best thing is toilet paper. Toilet paper will probably go for $30 a roll. Okay? And I'm not joking. It's going to be like gold. And here's a story. When I worked Hurricane Andrew, there was a man that went up north to Canada every year. He went into town to pick up his supplies. He lived way out in the woods in the summertime. Went into town to pick up his supplies, and this is in August. It was August when this occurred. And he saw on the news that this hurricane had hit where he lived. He took everything out of his truck, left it there at the store, and he loaded up on toilet paper, baby diapers, and feminine hygiene supplies. He packed his truck and he drove back to his neighborhood because he knew who his neighbors were and what they were going to need. Water and food will take care of themselves, but toilet paper, baby diapers, and feminine hygiene supplies are the things that people don't think about. So think about putting those things that you need into your kits. And a change of layered clothing. Be able to go from a very hot environment to a very cold environment. So if your kit was built this last summer and we have the earthquake tonight and you put summer clothes in there, are they going to do a lot of good tonight? Probably not. So think about a layer of clothing. And then beyond these essentials, whatever you want. Put the things that you want. Not what somebody's going to tell you, it's what you want. Make a plan. When you make your plan, you need to basically sit down and you need to be methodical because this plan is not just a plan that you're going to write and say, okay, we did it and throw it on a shelf. This is your instruction manual. Remember I told you the first thing that checks out is your brain? So when your brain checks out, you need a checklist. And that's what this plan is going to be. And it's not just for you, it's for people that may come to your assistance that don't know you. So you want to basically name each person covered by the plan. You want to identify the homework and school address of everybody that's going to be covered in this plan. You want the date and the age, their date of birth and their age, any medical conditions, allergies, medications, access and functional needs issues that they might have, driver's license, security, social security, medical, all of the things that basically identify that person. Okay? Because what you're going to do is you're going to create an identity on paper. And that identity is going to be used in a disaster for two things. One, to identify that person, but two, to help begin reconstructing that person's life. If you have Pets, take a photograph of yourself with your pet. Why?
So you prove you own pet.
That's right. I may have my pet chipped, but somebody else can get that information. Oh, no, that's my cat. Well, here's a picture of me and my cat. We're together. You don't have that. Provide physical description of any pets or family members. You know, you want hair color, eye color, height, weight, and then include a recent photograph of family members also. Communication. You want to create a communication aspect to your plan. This is going to sound really weird, but it's something I did. In our house, when I first started doing this again, I created like what they have on the back of hotel doors, you know, the little map. And I put that in each one of my kids' room, and then I had one on the garage door. And my wife and my kids were like, this is weird. And I said, it's not for you. It's for when I have people that come, when we have visitors, they come stay in your room. They don't know where to go. So when they come in, I tell them, look, if there's something that happens in the middle of the night, we expect you to meet out here. Because you're my guest, and I'm going to take care of you. So we did do that. We identified a neighborhood location, a local location that's about a mile or 2 away, and then we have a regional reunification spot that's about 10 miles out. And actually ours is moved farther out than that now. But if somebody sent you in the middle of the night a message and it says, you need to evacuate now, what does that mean? Now if I tell you, you need to evacuate now, the city is on fire. Okay, I've got a little bit more information. The city's on fire, so I probably need to get out of the city. Where's my reunification spot out of the city? Because if they're all in the city, that could be a problem. So think about that. Map each location. So as you identify these, create a map. Even if it's just a, go get a AAA map or print out a Google Earth map or something, but identify on there. Everybody gets a copy of that. Have an out-of-state emergency contact. And then if you have a smartphone, create text message templates that are ready to send in a disaster. Have them ready to go so that you just basically have to find that one and boom, send it. I'm okay, I was at this point at this time, and somebody will know that you were safe at the time you sent it. The last thing that I would suggest you do for your communication plan is download AC Prepared, and I'll have a link to that here in a second. Important documents. You want to take all of your important documents, whether it's a rental agreement, a lease agreement, a mortgage agreement, your mortgage, your health insurance, anything and everything that is basically financially related. Okay, you need to take that, you need to scan it, and you need to put it into an electronic format. Put it on a hard drive or put it onto a thumb drive and sock it away someplace. Why is it important that you have those documents and have them readily accessible?
Because in the Santa Rosa fire, everything's gone. How do you prove you own the home?
There you go.
You have insurance for it. I just finished mine, by the way.
There you go. And insurance is one of the big things. Make sure you have your insurance policies and your accounts and all of that stuff included in that. When I worked the Northridge earthquake, little known fact was that the earthquake authority at the time, which was funded through the state of California, was out of money in almost 9 hours. The people that got paid were the people that showed up that had all their paperwork ready to go as soon as the doors opened. We were not aware of that. We were not aware that the money had run out, and that was basically identified later. So it's those that have the paperwork up front ready to go. You're going to get your light back a lot faster than if you have to try and dig it and find it.
So if it's on a thumb drive, what do you do when there's no electricity, there's no computers? What do you
So
say?
it may not be for you, but where you're going to go to a release center usually, they'll have a computer and you can hand it to them, and then they can go ahead and take the information that they need from that.
Isn't it just better to have a binder with copies?
You can do that too, and I would strongly suggest you have both.
Okay.
I have both. In fact, I have paper documents that are stored off-site in a fireproof safe. I have identification documents that are stored on the East Coast with my brother. And then I have electronic means also, as does my wife.
I mean, things like the passport. I mean, ours are at the bank.
Should be okay there.
No.
You might not be able to get in there,
That's the
but
problem.
you should make a photocopy or scan an electronic copy so that you can at least have that.
Or the number, got a passport number.
So I would store, if you can still get a safety deposit box, I would still keep it there, but I would make a copy of it so that you have a copy in the event that you can't get into the bank.
Okay.
And you probably need your key.
If they're even
So,
open or if the building is still even there.
yeah, well, you're not gonna get in unless the bank opens up, and
Yeah.
so, that's why I say make copies, make electronic copies, scan them. You want to take anything that you cherish, like photographs, things like that, make copies of them, store them electronically. But other things that you may cherish, so like I collect books. I have taken video of every single book that I own in my library. Now they're worth a lot to me, when I turn them into the insurance, it's probably worth $0.25. But to me it means something, so I do have a record of what I own. So you want to keep that record with you also. The fourth part of your plan is to assign tasks to the people in your family or your household. You basically want to say, when this earthquake happens, or this fire happens, or this flood happens, or this meteor happens, these are the things that each one of us does. Okay, so, or if you're by yourself, make a plan, methodical plan. This is what I do first, this is what I do second, third, fourth. But you want to make a methodical plan. Put out small fires, clean up spills, turn off the gas, only if you smell gas. Turn off the water, turn off the power. Whatever it is that needs to happen, create a checklist, make it sequential. So that everybody has a job to do. That does two things. One, it puts people into action, doing something that's going to help in the response, but it also starts to take their mind off of what's happened. By starting to do something, okay, now I'm focused on something and I'm not thinking about what actually happened. And then you need to practice your plan. So I told you I put the little sign on the back of the door. So my wife and I came to an agreement when we started planning in our house. I said, if one of us decides that we need to hold a drill in the house, all we have to do is say earthquake, and no questions asked, we do the drill. And that was our agreement. So we have our go bags, we have everything, we think we're ready. So one night we're in bed, we're reading before it's time to go to sleep, and I look over and I go, earthquake! And she looks at me and she goes, really? And I go, yeah, you said we would do this. She goes, no. And so my feelings are kind of hurt at that point. I'm like, she goes, okay, fine. So we jump up and we start going through the motions, and it's a disaster. It was horrible. We thought we knew what we were doing. I picked up my go bag. It weighed like 70 pounds. What do I have in here? And we started to go through the whole motions, and we just started laughing. We were like, we're dead. This isn't working. So we agreed, we'll stop this. We'll work on it tomorrow. So we sat down the next day and we kind of went through and we said, we don't need all the junk in these go bags. What I need is if somebody knocks on the door and says, you get to leave now, that's all I need. That's why now everything is electronic on a drive. That's my paperwork. I've got layered clothing, I've got a radio that I can crank that has a flashlight and a radio, and I can charge my phone on it. I've pared everything down to a small bag, which is basically grab it and get out. Before, we thought we were going camping, and it just didn't make any sense. So practice this plan. When you create this plan, practice it. Because if you fail, failure is information. It's like, whoa, what can I do better next time? If you don't fail, you're not going to know what to do. So you need to do it. You need to find out what doesn't work so that you can fix it. Do it as a fire drill. Do it as an earthquake drill. Do a communications drill. Call the people back in the East Coast or wherever it is and say, we're just checking in. This is our communications test. We just want to make sure we can reach you. Everybody knows who to call. Very simple. Nothing elaborate. Do an economic stress test. Figure out what you're going to do if your company, your business goes away. Where do you get money from? How long can you survive without that job? Or if your house fell down? Or if your bank is gone? Try to start to stress your system, the system that you live with every day. And then update your plan to fix what doesn't work. A great time to do this is when we do time change. You know, they tell you to change your batteries. Do a drill right then and there. Doesn't take long, maybe 10 minutes at the most. Get educated, get engaged, join the community emergency response team. They offer it twice a year through the fire department here. Excellent program. Become a Skywarn storm spotter. We have the National Weather Service come out twice a year, and they will train you basically to what to look for severe weather. They want to know what's happening here in Livermore because, you know, they can see what's happening on the radar, but the problem is that the radar shoots over Livermore from Monterey. By the time it comes over us, it's at 4,000 feet. Well, if it's a low storm, you know, it could be 2,500 feet, and you could have precipitation come out. They don't see that. It could be hail, it could be whatever. So they want to know, so you can become a storm spotter. Become a ham radio operator. We are looking for ham radio operators. They are going to be the communications go-to during a large earthquake. And then you can become a Red Cross volunteer. We're looking for people that may be interested in doing shelter management. So if we have to spin up a care and shelter site, we need people that can step in there and help them do that. And then take CPR, AED, and first aid training. So these are the types of things that you can do not only to help yourself, but you can help your community by doing that. So I told you I'd talk about AC Alert and the communications piece. Alameda County went out and purchased an app called AC Alert. And AC Alert is the mass notification system that the city of Livermore has adopted. So it's a system that will notify you in the event of a disaster, but it requires right now that you opt in. Now there is an element, like in Santa Rosa, remember people said they didn't get the message and they're like, we can issue that message, but we have to go through the county to do that. So we could call the county and we could say, we have something that's happening really, really bad here and you need to notify everybody. And they will do that. But for other smaller events, let's say we have flooding like we had last February, right? It doesn't impact the entire community, but we can send out a notice to the entire community that's just, you know, here's a warning, we've got flooding in these areas, please stay away. But those are opt-in, and there's an app that goes with that that's called AC Prepared, and it will also send them, the AC Alert system sends to that app also. But I would strongly suggest that if you have not signed up for AC Alert, that you do. And I apologize, this is really poor up here, but it's acgov.org/emergency site. And at the end here, I'll have my information, so if you want to send me an email, I'll be happy to send this information to you. But it's acgov.org/emergency site. And this is the way that the city will notify you, or one of the ways the city will notify you. We have a reverse 911 system, but does anybody know what the problem is with that? It goes to landlines only. So how many of you still have a landline? Most everybody. Okay, that's good. A lot of people don't. So they can't get notified. So that's why we're going to adopt this also. So this is why you're here. Remember I told you at the beginning I'm going to answer your question right now. So if you're not prepared for an earthquake, you're not prepared. I can see a hurricane coming 5, 6, 7 days out. Tornado, I might get 30 minutes warning. Sometimes you get more depending on how big the storm is. They know that they can storm warn it. But an earthquake, if it happened right now and you're not prepared, are you prepared? No. You can't run out and say, oh, the earthquake just happened, now I'm going to get prepared. You have to be prepared now. So earthquakes basically cause human suffering. This is a couple that had to move out of their apartment in Northridge and basically lived on the sidewalk for 2 weeks. These are people lining up to get water because they had no water. Loss of infrastructure. You've got the Silmar interchange, which is the I-5 between Northern and Southern California out of Pasadena. No, not Pasadena, but out of Silmar right there. This right here is a broken water main with a gas rupture, and then you can't see it, but there's electrical lines down in there also, which is what actually triggered the fire. So these people aren't going to have gas, and they don't have water, and they probably don't have electricity. And then the last one is kind of to represent loss of services that we depend on a day-to-day basis. You've lost the hospital. That was actually a Kaiser clinic. It wasn't really a hospital. But the other one is in Kalinga, where the city manager of Livermore, he was actually there at the time. And I was just kind of making a joke. This is a TV repair shop, so that's a service that we all really need. So, but those are the types of things that we need to think about, because those are the impacts that are going to occur here if we have a large-scale earthquake. So an earthquake is basically a rupture underground, usually less than 25 miles, and it's basically the earth is kind of grinding against itself, and then it kind of sticks, and it's still trying to get away from that sticky spot, and boom, it breaks. And when it breaks, it sends out all these, it sends out waves, S waves, P waves, there's a lot of technical terms. But the bottom line is the ground starts moving. And when the ground starts moving, it can mean two things. It can mean you can have a lot of fun. If I'm standing out in the field and things moving, oh, this is fun, wow, big deal. But if I'm in a building, it may not be so fun. And that's going to be dependent on my preparation, my mitigation, and all of those things. Right now, USPS says that there is a 99.7% probability that within the next 30 years, it's always 30 years, it's been 30 years since I was a kid, but by 2032 we'll have a 6.7 or larger within the state. So, and a 6.7 is probably not even the big one. So, in an earthquake, if I told you we just had a 6.2 earthquake, what does that mean to you? Is that a big earthquake?
Yeah.
It's reasonably large, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a 6.2 earthquake here versus a 6.2 earthquake in some place like Iran, are they the same thing?
No.
Why?
Building codes.
Building codes. So 6.2 doesn't tell me anything. It just tells me how big the earthquake was. What I look for, and what I would have you start looking for, and you can see this every time they say there's been an earthquake, is what's called the modified Mercalli indicator or index, or it's just a modified Mercalli, it's MMI. But it goes by, the I is used, it's got a lot of different names. And what it basically is it's a scale that goes from 1 to 10 plus, and it's perceived shaking. What is it that I am feeling? So a 1 is, I don't feel it. A 5 is, oh yeah, it's kind of moving around. You know, I might hear some noise and the move, I can feel the building move. But when I get to a 10 and go above a 10, the shaking is so violent that literally right now I probably would not be standing. I would probably be flying through the air because the ground is just moving. That tells me something. So if you say, oh yeah, we had a 5.9, but with an MMI of 8, I'm going, whoa, now I'm probably expecting some damage from that 5.8. But if you tell me we had a 5.8 with an MMI of 3, I'm probably going, oh, okay, big deal. What causes the damage in an earthquake? It's the shaking.
Yeah.
It's the shaking. So the amount of energy release doesn't matter to me. I want to know what that shaking is. So if you tell me 5.9 MMI 7, okay, you've got my attention. You tell me 5.9 MMI 2, I'm going back to bed. Because there's probably not a whole lot of shaking going on. Okay. Yes?
Do they still have the earthquake vulnerability maps?
They do.
I know they had them a few years ago, and I haven't seen them since.
Yeah, so ABAG, which used to do those, I kind of got out of the business of doing that, but they do still exist. The probability maps and showing on the fault which areas, yeah. Those are actually required by law, California state law, and they do still exist.
Because I know in Livermore itself, there's different vulnerabilities, one part of town versus the other part of town, to one of the Hayward Faults or any of the other faults.
So what is our biggest threat here, do you think?
Well, probably liquefaction.
Liquefaction, and do we have a fault nearby?
Greenville.
We have the Greenville Fault, which runs right down Vasco and Greenville Road and
Well, the Hayward Fault, we're vulnerable.
the Hayward Fault too. Hayward Fault's a big one. So the Greenville can pop off at 6.7. The Hayward is probably about the same, but the Hayward is a lot longer. So we do have some hazards in the area that we are vulnerable to. So you were just talking about this, right? So I apologize once again for how small this is, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a scenario on the Hayward Fault. This little dot right here is Livermore. I want you to watch that little dot. This is the epicenter of the earthquake. It's going to be at the intersection of the Hayward and the Rogers Creek Fault. This right here is the old MMI scale. This is kind of the new one. But the bottom line is this part, what they did is it used to divide up a lot more. Now they kind of consolidated some areas. But when you start getting into this dark, you know, whatever it is, it's almost black, you're talking violent shaking. When you're in this yellow to orange right here, you're talking destruction. You're talking these buildings are going to be damaged. So I want you to watch this. This was actually created with a supercomputer. USGS created this. And it'll give you an idea as to what's going to happen, what could happen. So, boom, that's when the waves start reading out, about 3 seconds out. Now, the purple and blue is just slight. That's when you're going to go, ooh, do we have an earthquake? Right now, ooh, I just felt an earthquake. Whoa. Kind of, yeah, just a little wobble, boom, right there. Whoa, now this place is rocking and rolling. Now look at that dark, that black. See that black? Boom, there goes Bilbao, and there's Livermore. 38 seconds in. That's the kind of ground movement that we don't want to feel. And look how long it keeps going on. We're now 50 seconds into it. And it just keeps radiating and radiating and radiating. Do you know why we're going to feel it that way? What are we built on? These are alluvial soils. These are really soft soils. This is where everything's over eons have just come down out of the mountains. We're built on silt down here. So remember I was telling you I used to stick my head in the sand? I go, I don't want to think about this. That's why. I didn't want to admit that that was going to happen. The reality is it will probably happen in our lifetime. Will it be that bad? I don't know. But it will happen. So when it does happen, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to drop to the floor. Heard drop, cover, hold on, right? Drop to the floor, cover yourself by getting under a table or sturdy furniture. Hold on to the furniture so that as it moves, you move with it. When the shaking stops, you check yourself first. Who's the most important person after a disaster? You are. Your family and your loved ones are very important. But unless you are 100% and capable of taking care of yourself, it's going to be hard for you to take care of someone else. So you need to go ahead and evaluate your immediate surroundings and yourself. And then you need to decide what you're going to do. Am I going to stay in this building, this house, or am I getting out? Depending on the size of the earthquake, it may be safer to stay inside for the time being. Most houses today can withstand, 6.5 to 7. probably be okay. So you need to think about that, evaluate that. If you are mobility bound, or if you're wheelchair bound, or you have mobility issues and you can't duck under something, get down low, cover yourself up with your, put a book over you, something. Get next to an interior wall. Get down small. The idea is just to protect yourself so while that shaking's going on, you don't get hurt. If you're in bed, curl up in a fetal position, pull the covers over your head, hide from the boogeyman. That's what we want you to do. Make yourself small in that bed. Put pillows over you, put blankets over you, hold on to the bed, because if it is a big weight, the bed's probably going to start moving around. So you want to ride it out. Same thing, when it stops, evaluate your surroundings, your personal situation, and then go into action. If you're in a vehicle, you want to pull over to the side of the road where it's safe. That doesn't mean pull under an underpass or an overpass, because that can fall on you, which we had the unfortunate accident today in Florida, if you saw that. So you don't want to get underneath that. You want to stay away from big trees, because trees can snap. There's a tree in Sequoia that was actually snapped off in an earthquake in the 1800s, and you can actually still see where way up, it just snapped. Boom, because it started whipping. It just snapped the top off. Avoid buildings, power poles, things like that. When the shaking stops, you need to evaluate your immediate surroundings, and then you need to decide, am I going to keep driving? Because while it may be safe here, where you're going down the road, the bridge may be out, the road may be destroyed, there may be power poles. You need to understand what your routes are. So, I know my routes home. I know I'm probably not getting home because I have a couple of creek crossings I've got to get across. In a large quake, I'm probably not getting across. So I need to think about that. If I'm on the road and I've got to come down to the Dublin interchange, probably not getting here. Same thing with the Altamont. What if the railroad trestle goes down up there? It's right across the freeway, right? Maybe I'm not getting here or getting out of here. So evaluate, think about that. When you drive around town, look around and say, oh, something happened right now. Could I get home? Could I get to work? Could I get home from work? Mitigation is basically the action that we take to minimize our vulnerability to the hazard. So we've always heard people say, oh, you need to bolt the foundation of your house down. That's a mitigation measure. What we're trying to do is minimize the effects of the earthquake on the foundation of the house and the house sliding off the foundation. I mitigated against food spilling onto my floor by putting latches on my refrigerator. So we definitely want to do mitigation. Mitigation and preparedness, they're two different activities, but they go hand in hand. Questions on mitigation? Pretty simple. So earthquake preparedness is exactly what we talked about at the beginning. Oh yes, question?
Would you want it to slide a little bit? Because if it's stiff, it might.
The house?
Yeah.
So the house will bend. In fact, almost all houses are made out of wood. So the frame will flex. But I don't want the house sliding off the foundation, because then what can happen is the house can actually become damaged when it slides off. So there's a picture, I don't have it here, of Northridge, where there's a lady standing in front of her house, and the house looks totally normal. Except that the steps up to it, she had one of those craftsman homes where you had to go up like 4 steps to get up. Well, the steps, the door's way down here, and the steps are like right at the top of the door because the whole house fell off. Well, now her house is not usable. And because it's not on the foundation. So basically she lost her house. It survived because it bends, but when it came off, it was no longer a usable dwelling. So you want some bending, but you don't want it coming off of your foundation. They build buildings that are like on rollers or rubber dampers so that they do what you're saying. They kind of move back and forth. In fact, there's a hotel down in downtown Los Angeles built on ball bearings. And when the Northridge earthquake, it moved on those ball bearings. It's kind of like if I took this, and I don't know if I can do it, but I can't. But it's kind of like balancing a stick on your finger, and that's what it did. So develop a home earthquake plan, just like you're going to create for anything. That earthquake plan that you're going to develop is really going to be that preparedness plan we talked about. Because if you're prepared for an earthquake, you're prepared for everything. You want to conduct your earthquake drills. You want to develop a plan for reuniting your family members. Does all this sound familiar? You want to identify the out-of-state family contact. You want to keep supplies on hand, and you want to keep your vehicle's gas tank at least half full. So say this with me. Half a tank is the new empty. Ready? Half a tank is the new empty. Say it again. Half a tank is the new empty. One more time. Half a tank is the new empty. Keep saying it. Because when you pull into the gas station, you fill up for half a tank, you're going to feel a lot better because you didn't spend $100. And the other thing is you're not going to be caught like people in Hurricane Rita who were told to evacuate the city of Houston, and there were millions of people trying to get out of town, and they ran out of gas. And there you are sitting on the side of the freeway, and you got a hurricane bearing down on you and nowhere to go. Now, we're not going to have that happen here, but it could be something like that. Maybe it could be a wildfire. Something like that. The idea is to make sure you have enough gas to get out of here. I think we got one to death. When the earthquake occurs, you're going to activate your plan. Remember I told you it's a checklist. It's not something we create and put on the shelf. You're going to activate that plan. You're going to execute each step of that plan in the order that you created your plan. So if you say, you know, Bob, you do this, Sally, you do this, Jimmy, you do this, that's what people are going to do. They're going to execute just the way that plan is written. You're going to respond in a calm, methodical, and professional manner. And you will, because remember what I told you at the beginning? I told you we prepare to respond, right? Okay? So we don't want to react. Let me give you an example of react. If I gave you a box, and it had all kinds of buttons on it and lights, and I handed it to you, and all of a sudden it went off, and it's flashing and making noise, what are you going to do?
Drop it, give it back.
You're going to go, whoa, what do I do with this? Right? That's a reaction. But if I train you, and I explain what this thing is, and how you turn those lights off and everything, when it goes off, you're going to go, oh, click, 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 click. That's a response. So when you came in here, you were probably going, oh, I'm going to react. Now when you walk out of here tonight, you're going to start to respond. Because you're going to think about it, and you're going to, okay, I've got a plan. I know what I'm going to do. I've mitigated against these vulnerabilities. I know what to expect. So when all of this happens, my brain's not going to check out. I'm going to use my brain, the most important tool I have. Okay? Stress will make you dumb. But if you practice and you know what to expect and you've done all the work in advance, that brain's not going to check out. You go, I'm going to respond. So that's why we prepare. We prepare so that we can respond. So here's your homework. When you get home, get a bag. It can be a drawstring bag, an old backpack, whatever it is that you decide. It can be a grocery bag. I want you to put a pair of slippers or some old shoes in it. I want you to put a whistle in it. I want you to put a flashlight in it with some spare batteries, hopefully. And if you don't have one, try and get a little radio, AM, FM radio. Yes?
Are you giving us any handouts of this? This is a lot.
I will make these, I'll make all of this available to you. I have a sign up over here, and I'll give you my information here if you want. You can, if you leave me your name, I will send it to you, or you can just go ahead and send me an email. I'll have the information that you can contact me. So I will provide all of this to you if you want it. And you're going to take that stuff, you're going to put it in that bag, and you're going to put it down next to your bed. So you can tie it to the frame, or you can just kind of wedge it down there. But that's your homework. Because when the earthquake happens, it's not going to be at 2 o'clock on a beautiful sunny afternoon. It's going to be on a night like tonight. It's going to be 34 degrees outside. The wind's going to be howling. It's going to be raining. It's going to be cold. And boom. It's going to be that scenario that we saw. And that's not the time that you want to jump up and react and basically step in glass. Okay? Again, I'm going to reach down to grab that bag, I'm going to put on my slippers. And I have a flashlight now to see what's on the floor. And I have a radio to turn on to listen to KCBS and see what's happening. I have a whistle in the event that I become trapped, and I can blow that whistle. Okay? So I have right next to my bed, on my side and my wife's side, we each have a bag that has these things. And that's the beginning. That's the beginning of being prepared and responding. Okay? Because in the middle of the night, you don't want to react, you want to respond. Yes?
We also put a crowbar under our bed,
Okay?
just because somebody was telling us about the doors shift, you know?
They do.
And to be able to get to my kids, I mean, I suppose I could go out our sliding doors going around, but anyway, I would just be able to get to the kids.
That's a good thing. And remember I told you you want to create the kit for you? I never heard that, but I'm glad you said that because, you know, in Northridge, I jumped up out of bed like an idiot. And I was running to my daughter's bedroom because her crib was right under her window. And I go, oh, that window's going to blow out. And I'm running, I jump out of bed. The first thing that happens is I'm slammed back into the bed because I couldn't stand. And the bedroom door slammed shut. Had I been running through that door when it slammed shut, I probably would have been hurt. So, you know, doors can become weapons. And they can lock. They probably, you know, if the house shifts or something, it's a good idea to have that. So that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. I've never thought of that. And I will put one under my bed now, too. Any questions? All right, let me give you my information here. So this is my information. I'm Herbert Cole. I am the emergency manager for the city of Livermore here. My telephone number is, and you can call me. I will answer the phone. I work for you. It's 960-4038. 960-4038. If you have questions, concerns, let me know. If you want me to come out to your neighborhood and do this for your neighbors, I'm more than happy to do that also. My email is hmcole@cityoflivermore.net. And like I said, if you want to go ahead and put your name on the paper, I'm more than happy to take it that way too, and I will send all of you this information. If you want this information, you didn't put your name down, just send me an email and I'll give it to you. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have another question. One of my pain points is my husband takes the ACE train into Sunnyvale, so he won't be coming home. I work from home, unless I'm out at a client or something like that. So I just have this fear of, I'm putting together this plan, okay, this is what you're gonna do, this is what you're gonna do, but we're all not gonna be there. We're not gonna be home. I may be by myself, and I'm gonna go running to my kids, or I have no idea what.
So this is that communications piece. You want to practice that communications piece, knowing that your husband is probably going to be in Sunnyvale, that your kids are going to be in school, and you will be at home. Start to think about, okay, how do we communicate? We may not be able to physically communicate, but I can go to my child's school and I can say, what is the process in the event there's a large-scale event? What do you do? What is the process for me coming to get my children? Where will my children go if they can't stay in this school? And then let your children know. If I can't be here at home, you come to the house, it's after school and you're coming home and I'm not here, this is where I will be. That's part of that communication up front. And kind of begin to create that and test it. See if that does work. Yes?
I have heard that that's one of the worst things a parent can do is run the school. Trust that the school has a system in place and they will contact you when they're able to tell you where your child is. But a lot of times parents are running to schools and then they're having issues.
And the school is overwhelmed, and the school, even though your child goes there at a high-stress event, they may not know who you are. I mean, they know who you are, but they may not know who you are at that time. Do you have identification that shows that this is your child? How do I know that you're this child's parent? Just screaming and yelling and telling me, doesn't prove it. So these are the things that you need to do in that communications plan. Get those things in advance, prepare.
How well are facilities like schools, hospitals, nursing homes, large-scale facilities prepared for disasters? Because we just heard of the one, what was that, during the fire, where people couldn't get out?
It depends on the facility, and so that's one of the reasons I'm starting to do these throughout the city. I'm also going to do this for businesses, so I want businesses to start to think about, kind of that, what do I do as a business to prepare myself? That includes homes. So we have, assisted care facilities and things like that. I would like for them to come to these. I'd like to go to them and kind of help them start to prepare for those things, because it's a mixed bag. Yes.
I've heard that the cell phones, possibly in a crisis, they'll block us out, so you can't use it because the emergency organizations are going to use it for themselves, and they don't want to have it all blocked up, so they can't use it.
Yeah, that's called wireless priority system. It's WPS, and it does occur. But what it does is it doesn't block you, it just reprioritizes the calls. So city governments, county government, state government, federal government, they have a code, they punch it in, and what it does is it pushes their call to the top. It doesn't mean that you're cut out. It just means that they go to the top of the list, they make their call, and then whoever's behind them can make their call.
The problem is, it isn't that. Everybody's doing cell calls. The towers, the network is not set up to do that. I worked for the phone company for a long time. That's why a landline is to keep a landline, because even if you lose power, if the cell towers are down, a landline will work because it does not run on the power system.
And the problem with that though now is a lot of it's going to voice over IP. So when I left AT&T, because I did work at AT&T, when I left there, it was becoming harder and harder to find people that were having traditional landlines that were jack powered.
Yeah.
So a lot of it now is voice over IP, and people think that's a landline, and it really isn't. If you can hold on to a landline, or you want a landline, in fact, I think in some areas they don't even offer them anymore. They're trying to move everybody onto the internet. But if you can, hold on to it.